to the 15th edition of the LoJoWo podcast. I'm recording this on September 14th, so there's a lot to talk about in this episode because it's been a little while since I sat down and recorded something where I really hit on everything. So there's going to be a lot to touch on in this episode. We're going to go over all defensive teams for a little bit, some coaching staff movement, and obviously the playoffs and everything that's happening there. So I guess stay tuned and keep listening to hear about all of that stuff that you definitely want to hear about. Yeah, so like I said, first off, I'm going to touch on all defensive teams really quick. And I guess just season awards in general. I'm pretty sure there hasn't been a new season award that I haven't touched on in an episode yet that's got revealed where I've talked about the result. I think this is the only one, which is the all defensive teams. I think that's the only one that's out right now that I haven't talked about yet. So I'm just going to look at that really quick. So for the all defensive teams, I had an episode, I think it was the same episode that I talked about Defensive Player of the Year, where I gave my picks for the all defensive teams and where the players that I chose, where I had them ranked on the teams where I thought people should end up this year. But yeah, so I had something very similar. With all the season awards so far, I've had most of them have been my picks for the awards that have been the winners of them. There was one that was kind of half my pick and half a little bit of my second pick. That was the Brandon Ingram one with the most improved player. And that was just because I wanted to give it to Luka just because I thought that I think he made the biggest jump this season. But there's some, a lot of people they kind of rule out second year players because that's where your biggest jump usually comes, is between your first and second season. And so a lot of people who have votes don't vote for those people. So for me, I was kind of like, if I'm including second year players, I'm choosing Luka. If I'm using that rule that I can't vote for one of them, I'm choosing Brandon Ingram. And Brandon Ingram was the one that won it. And I kind of knew that was going to be the case just because I knew that it's going to be really hard for a second year player to win it just because of how many people really kind of follow that rule. And I guess from my point of view, I just feel like if we are going to use that as a rule, if that's going to be what dictates like a lot of the voting, we should make it a rule. Like that should just be a rule. It shouldn't, because if you're technically including second year players and people are just not voting for them because it's their own personal rule, but it's such a widespread personal rule, I feel like we probably just shouldn't even include them. Just make it one or the other, I guess, clarify it, to have more consistency across voting. But yeah, more objectivity. But yeah, and then the other one that I didn't get right was Montrezl Harrell. And I said in mine that it's definitely going to be either Schroeder or Harrell. I wouldn't be surprised either way, but Schroeder was my personal pick just because he played more minutes, and I thought he played a bigger role on his team than Montrezl Harrell did. But I wouldn't be mad that if Montrezl Harrell won it, which he ended up winning it. So, personally, I would just choose Schroeder, like I said. But I think it's a pretty well-deserved award from Montrezl Harrell. He had a really good season off the bench as well. So, yeah, going into all defensive teams. So the first team was all chalk for me. It was exactly the way I had him on here in the same order too. So Rudy Gobert was the center. The first forward was Giannis. The second forward was AD. And the first guard was Marcus Smart, and the second guard was Ben Simmons. So it was the same order of positions and everything that I had on my team. At least I think. I might have had actually the guards flipped around with Ben Simmons and Marcus Smart. But I don't know. It very well could have been the other way around. I guess I don't remember. But that was definitely my first team, though. And then, so my second team, I have, they had Brook Lopez at center, which I had as well. First forward was Kawhi, which I don't remember the forward positions, like which one came first or not, but Kawhi was definitely on mine, and Bam was the other forward, and those are my forwards as well. But this is where it changes. So on the second team, the guards, I didn't have either of these guards that ended up on the second team. I had two different ones for both of the guard spots, but that was the only difference. On the official all defensive teams, second team, the two guard spots were given to Eric Bledsoe and Patrick Beverley, respectively. Which, yeah, they're both really good defensive backcourt players, and I think I even shouted both of them. I might have them out in honorable mentions, but in my opinion, I had Drew Holiday and Jimmy Butler as the two on there. I just thought they had superior seasons, both of them much more versatile and I think impactful on that end of the ball. And yeah, I also really enjoyed the JJ Redick podcast episode. Well, I think he renamed it now. Him and Tommy Alter are doing the podcast together called The Old Man and the Three, I think is what it's called. But they had KD on a very recent episode within the last week or so. It definitely was within the last week because that's when I think these teams were released. But they were talking about all defensive teams, talking about how Drew Holiday was snubbed. I believe they also did mention Jimmy Butler. I don't think they mentioned anyone other than that, though. So that was kind of cool that the two people that I thought should be on there were the ones they mentioned as snubs. But yeah, they were for sure talking about Drew Holiday, though, as who definitely should have been on there. And they were actually advocating for him to be on first team. They both were saying that he was the best defensive guard in the NBA. Both KD and JJ were saying that. So I thought that was kind of cool to see the player's perspective of it. That's what they talked a lot about, was how media sometimes get an idea of who they think is a good defender, but like players don't think the same way about it. Like KD, I think, said something like, a lot of those players that I see on all defensive teams sometimes from year to year, I look at them and I'm just kind of like how? Like that guy is so easy to score on, or something like that, which I think was just funny. And I think is also true. I think there's a lot of media members that really are, I'm just going to say it, like really suck at voting for all defensive teams, for awards in general, but especially all defense stuff. I don't know why it's so hard. I honestly believe some of these people that have their votes should not have them. Like, for Defensive Player of the Year, there was, the official voting that got released, there were, these people that got votes was, Andre Drummond and Hassan Whiteside. I think there was even some other ones that were just kind of out of nowhere. And I've seen, Jokic and Harden both get votes before in other years, which doesn't make any sense at all. I don't know who these people are that have these votes that are just, they make zero sense. The Whiteside and Drummond at least makes statistical sense in a way, just because, you're looking at Whiteside and you're you see the blocks, you see, he leads the league in blocks, so he has to be a defensive player of the year or whatever. So I get that. And then also with Andre Drummond, he leads the league in rebounding every year, and most rebounds are defensive rebounds, so they kind of, I guess, count defensive rebounds as a defensive stat, and think of it that way, I guess, which is kind of weird, but I guess I can understand it a little bit. But yeah, I just think some of those people should not. They kind of show that they don't really know what they're doing when they vote for people like that. But yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, here, I didn't see this before, but there's other players receiving votes for all defensive teams. So the leading guard that was the first one snubbed off the all defensive team when they got the most votes that didn't make it on was Chris Dunn, which I understand. He was one of my honorable mentions in my episode that I talked about. Kyle Lowry was the second most, which I also understand that, he's a good defensive guard. I might have shouted him out a little bit. The only thing with that is Chris Paul's on here later, but I'm just going to mention him in this because him and Lowry are kind of similar in this idea. They're both good defenders, but they're not good, lockdown one-on-one defenders usually. They're not bad at that, but that's not the type of defender they are. So usually I like to prioritize, especially with backcourt defenders, guys that can lock on their man, stay in front of them, and not let them drive past them to the rim, I think is super valuable. And so that's where you get guys like Drew Holiday and Chris Dunn and Marcus Smart and those kinds of guys. Like that's what they're really good at. Jimmy Butler, another one. But I don't have any problem with Kyle Lowry getting votes. I was just kind of explaining my thinking of it a little bit. So yeah, but I understand that Kyle Lowry is very valuable on both sides of the ball. With how he plays, very like him and Chris Paul are both a lot like this, where they'll sell contact to get lots of calls, or they'll just think a couple steps ahead of players on the other team. Do things that are kind of creative, or use their fouls in a certain way, use their motion or body in a certain way to get a certain call or a certain thing to happen. They both dive for loose balls and really hustle, and they do all like the little stuff. So yeah, that stuff is super valuable too. But when it comes to on ball lockdown defense, like not letting your man score in a one-on-one scenario, or like even in isolation or whatever, they wouldn't be my first picks in that, and I don't think it would be most people's first picks. They're not bad at that, but just they're limited with their size for sure. But yeah, they make up elsewhere on that end of the court, so I can understand them getting votes. But yeah, so Chris Dunn had the most, Lowry had second most, and then Drew Holiday had third most, which I think that he should have been on the team. I think where he's not getting, he's losing a lot of votes is maybe from advanced metrics, because his advanced metrics don't look super good this year, and that's just because his team was terrible on defense this season. And usually, with how good defensive players are, they look way better when they're on a team that's competent defensively. When they are surrounded with other good defenders, they look way better, and their advanced stats look way better just because of that. Just because they're if they're on a good switchable team that's taking care of their man, they'll just the numbers will bear it out to show that they are a more effective defender, because a lot of defense comes from your teammates as well. But Drew Holiday in a vacuum, I think, is arguably the best guard defensively in the NBA. Plenty of players, I've heard a lot of people talk about it. Damian Lillard was another one that talked about it, that they think Drew Holiday is the best defensive guard in the NBA. And Marcus Smart, I think, would be the other one that would be in the conversation for most people. So, yeah, and he played a full season and had a really good individual season. I think that he should have been included on these teams. Yeah, fourth most votes were Chris Paul. I'm just going to kind of fly through these now. Fifth, Paul George, and there's Jaylen Brown, Luka Doncic. Why? That doesn't make any sense. Luka Doncic is not a awful defender, but he is in no way any kind of an all defensive caliber defender, like in any world. So I don't understand that at all. Paul George and Jaylen Brown are both really good defenders, but I think why they're getting not many votes is probably because they've got several votes on for forward spots as well, maybe. But yeah, both of them. And Paul George didn't play much of a season. He missed a lot of games. So, I guess what's this asterisk mean? Okay, yeah, so Jaylen Brown has an asterisk next to his name because he received one second-team vote at guard and one second-team vote at forward. But yeah, it chalks up 2 for him and just includes him in the forward or in the guard list. Yeah, so Luka Doncic got as many all defensive team votes as Jaylen Brown did. That shouldn't happen. That's what I'm saying. Some of these people should lose their votes. And this next one really goes along with what I just said. James Harden got 2 votes as well. See, that, no, not at all. Dante DiVincenzo, yeah, I mean, he's a good defender. That's just kind of out of left field, really random. He plays what does he play, 17, 18 minutes a game, maybe a little bit more than that. I don't know. He's not a super, he's a rotation player, but not he doesn't really play in crunch time at all. I don't know. It's kind of a weird one. DeJounte Murray is better, a better name than the last 3 I just said, Luka, Harden and Dante. DeJounte Murray is a really good young defender. A lot of things I was just saying, about other guys before, like he has quick hands and he stays in front of his man really well. Like sticks on like glue on him. I think he's gonna have a really good career, especially in the next few years. Being a really good perimeter defender with how athletic he is as well. But yeah, he plays for a San Antonio team that hasn't really done a whole lot this year. And also, for those of you who haven't heard too much buzz about DeJounte Murray, and that's probably just because he's not that great offensively. He's a really good defender. He's not terrible on offense. He can't shoot, really. He needs to work on his three-point shot. And he plays on a team where they don't have very many three-point shooters, so the ones that can shoot threes get a lot of minutes because that's just the way the game is played now. But he's a good defender, and he's also pretty shifty. Like, he can get to the rim pretty well. He's kind of has a similar game to like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if you are familiar with him. He's long, can slice up the defense, slash and drive to the rim. Pretty good at that. Floaters a little bit as well, and he has that in his arsenal. Yeah, and then Fred VanVleet, same type of thing that I was saying with Kyle Lowry a bit. He's kind of like Kyle Lowry prodigy. Play for the same team. I think Fred VanVleet's maybe a little bit more of a aggressive like stick on you type of defender than Lowry is. Also, VanVleet's really good at playing off ball superstars, like following guys that are like 3-point specialists, like a JJ Redick or a Stephen Curry, like how he did in the NBA Finals last season. They played box and one against Steph after KD and Clay went down. And Fred VanVleet was that one that was guarding Steph basically the whole game, and chasing him around screens off ball and just staying on him like the whole game, running around. So he's really good at that kind of stuff, and I don't disrespect him having 2 votes at all. Then Avery Bradley has 1 vote. Understand that. I've talked about him on this podcast before. He's a good point guard defender. Damian Lillard had 1 vote, which, that's another one that's just kind of completely out of nowhere. Like, I don't understand what people are watching. Like, Dame is a tad bit of a negative on the defensive end usually, just because of how much of an offensive load he carries. He's not like, he's improved defensively, and he's not like bad, but again, like we're talking about like defensive specialists usually here, like guys that are like you put on the best guy, like guys that's what these teams are for mostly, like the guys that are the most valuable on the defensive end, which Damian Lillard does not. He's somebody that you just wouldn't think of in that, right, and rightfully so. But like, I don't know, somebody gave him a vote. It'd be weird if like all these people that are giving these people votes are like the same ones that are voting for all these random people. I don't know. And then Chris Middleton got a vote, which, I mean, not bad. It's kind of weird that DiVincenzo got 2 votes and he only got 1. Middleton and I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like, they play for the same team. That's why I kind of compared them. But yeah. I guess I don't hate that. Russell Westbrook getting 1. I don't like. If he was the only one in here, if like Luka and James Harden and Dame, and I guess DiVincenzo were all not in this list, then I would probably single out Russell Westbrook and be like, why did he get a vote? But he's a better option than the guys I just listed, probably. He's pretty aggressive on defense usually. Like this season, he didn't have his best year. Defensively, I think last year would have been. I think he may have actually made an all defensive team last season. And that I guess I don't hate that, but yeah. So I'm not going to get too upset about him getting a vote this year, but I wouldn't, personally. And then forwards, PJ Tucker, not bad at all. He got the most out of the forwards that didn't make it. Jimmy Butler. So I don't understand why Jimmy Butler's listed as a forward on all of these. Like, even just in terms of when I'm pretty sure with All NBA, that's where he's going to be put, just because I see other people kind of putting him there. But I don't understand that. If you put Ben Simmons at a guard, why wouldn't you put Jimmy Butler? Like, I just don't really get that. He's usually listed at shooting guard usually, but he plays offensively like a point guard, and he's I feel like he qualifies even more as a point guard than people like Ben Simmons or LeBron James usually, just because defensively he guards point guards a lot. Like, that's not uncommon. He guards lots of different positions, but there's plenty of games where his primary assignment is like Damian Lillard or Kemba Walker. Like, those are people that Ben Simmons and LeBron do not guard, like, predominantly. Like, that's not their assignment. Jimmy Butler is a guard on both. You could call him a guard on offense, and you could call him a guard on defense, like, easily, both ways. So I think he should be listed as a guard. Like, I don't hate him being listed as a forward, but when you list other people at guard that make much less sense than Butler being at guard, that's when I'm like, why is Butler not a guard? Yeah, so he would have been in my guard spot on my all defensive team, my second team. And then Jason Tatum got the third most. He got 20. Jimmy Butler got 28, and Tucker got 29. Tatum, yeah. It's kind of weird that he got more votes than Brown. I mean, I guess they're both really similar. I think they're probably around the same level defensively. I think Brown pays more attention to the defensive end. Like, that's where it's kind of more of his specialty. Like, Tatum carries more of the offensive load. Brown, I feel like, carries more of the defensive load, usually, just typically. But, yeah, so it's kind of weird that Tatum gets 20 votes and Brown only gets 2. But, yeah, Pascal Siakam got 10, which, okay. I don't know. 10 seems like a lot, but I guess not. That's not terrible. LeBron James got 7, which I don't hate, actually. He had a really good defensive year. One of the best defensive years that he's had since Miami. So, actually, probably the best he's had since Miami. So I don't hate that. Miles Turner had 5, which that's pretty good, I guess. Miles Turner is a good defensive center. He had not as good a season this year as he has usually. I think he got less votes this year though than he does typically. He only got 5 this year. Yeah, he's a good rim protector, and he's not bad. Switching on to guards either, not terrible. It's like not the worst thing out there. Compared to most centers guarding guards. Yeah, OG Anunoby got 2 votes, which I like. I like to see that him represented. I think Anunoby might be should be at least the same amount of votes as Siakam. Maybe not. Maybe a little bit less. I get like Siakam may be more important to his team overall and plays more minutes. Maybe that's why people put him a little bit higher. But on the defensive end, I don't see Siakam really being more valuable than Anunoby. Like, Anunoby, you're usually putting on your best guy. Like, Anunoby in 2018 guarded LeBron in the Cleveland series. So, yeah. Aaron Baines got a vote, which that's kind of random. But I guess, well, maybe it's just kind of like how Brook Lopez was on all defensive team, second team. He's playing a really specific role, kind of protecting the rim pretty well in the restricted area and playing drop on the pick and roll, drop coverage. So that makes sense a little bit. Like, I'm not mad at that vote. Jonathan Isaac only got 1 vote. Well, I guess he had a really short season, so that makes sense. But Jonathan Isaac is a much better defender than a lot of these people that we've just went over, like Siakam and LeBron. Like, overall defense, like you would throw him on a guy. Like, Jonathan Isaac is probably my number 1 pick moving forward, either him or Bam as like a potential Giannis stopper. Like, if I'm playing the Bucks, a healthy Jonathan Isaac might be my first pick to have guarding him. Either, like I said, either him or Bam Adebayo. So yeah, which Bam is, if you forgot, he's on the second team, and so yeah, he did make it on there. He got a lot more votes than Isaac, which makes sense. Isaac had a pretty short season this year because he tore his ACL, I think, something like that, maybe meniscus, but something in his knee. And then Porzingis got a vote, which I like to see. He's a really good rim protector. Didn't have the best defensive year of his career, obviously, but yeah, I'm not gonna get mad at a vote. And then Matisse Thybulle got a vote, which I'm okay with too. He's a really handsy what I'm not okay with is Gary Harris didn't get a single vote. That's what I'm not okay with. And people like Fred VanVleet getting votes. I don't know. Really what I should be mad at more is the Luka, James Harden, and like those I'm kind of discounting just because I'm like, that's so ridiculous. I'm not even going to talk about it. But like, Fred VanVleet is like a legit. I'm not mad at him getting votes, but I'm mad at him getting votes over like Gary Harris. Yeah, I guess I'll stop talking about this now. I guess there's more actually. For centers, which I'm confused by because didn't we just see Miles Turner and Aaron Baines? They got votes as forwards apparently, which I don't really understand. When has Baines ever played the forward? I don't know if he's played the forward this season. Maybe alongside Kaminsky or Ayton. Sometimes I don't know, but I feel like Kaminsky's more of a forward than Baines is, and I also feel like Ayton might fit a little bit better as a forward than Baines does technically. But whatever. And Miles Turner, when he's in there along Sabonis, I feel like usually Sabonis is the forward, but I guess whatever. The centers that got votes was Embiid, Drummond, Whiteside, Adams. I should probably say their whole name, but yeah, Joel Embiid, Andre Drummond, Hassan Whiteside, Steven Adams, and Jared Allen. Not really mad at most of those other than Drummond and Whiteside. I don't understand those, and they both got 2. I understand Whiteside more than Drummond, but I feel like neither of them should be really on here. Like, I'm not saying they're like the worst defenders ever or anything like that, but neither of them are. Well, okay, let's say this. I'll say Whiteside could be a really good defender, but he lacks effort a lot on a lot of possessions, and really just tries to get blocks for the stats of it most of the time. He'll give up a defensive rebound to chase a block, or he'll completely, go for a blocking to, without regard of fouling or things like that. Or, he'll go for a block and not try to actually contest a shot, that type of thing. Like, cares more about the block than the contest, usually. And Drummond just, I don't know. Whenever he goes up against like good centers like Embiid or Jokic, he usually gets pummeled. So, yeah, I don't know. Steven Adams, I understand that. And Jared Allen, I definitely understand that. I think Jared Allen should probably get some of those votes from Drummond and Whiteside. And Embiid also only played like 60-something% of the season's games. So, yeah, I'd put him over him as well. But, yeah, that was the all defensive team stuff. I probably spent too much time on that, like way more than I should have. But I was interested in all the results. But yeah. I'll move on now to coaching changes, which most notably, there's definitely the Nash hire, but I'll talk about that next. First, I want to talk about Mike D'Antoni of the Houston Rockets. For those of you who don't know, Mike D'Antoni is one of the most revolutionary coaches in the past 30 years in basketball, I would say probably. A lot of the modern game, a lot of the things that you see in the modern game he was kind of like a pioneer of back in the early to mid 2000s with the 7 seconds or less Suns, which for those of you who don't know, again, 7 seconds or less Suns, were those early 2000 Suns teams that with Steve Nash and Sean Marion and Amari Stoudemire, all those guys, and their whole offensive identity was, you were looking for a shot within 7 seconds of the shot clock. Don't use more than 7 seconds of the shot clock. And that whole thing was just to, increase pace, and it was all kind of mathematics based, looking at how to find the best shot. It shouldn't take you, I guess, as much time to find the best shot, statistically speaking. And, they really prioritized threes and layups, which is like almost every team does that now for the most part. Lots of teams do. And that was really a thing that they revolutionized and started. But yeah, so they are the ones who really increased the pace of the league a lot and kind of they were kind of the forebearer of this style for the Warriors, which Steve Kerr was the head coach of the Warriors teams with, he still is, but the Warriors dynasty that just happened with Steph and Clay and Draymond, and then eventually KD. But Steve Kerr was really involved with the 7 seconds or less Suns. I believe he was on the coaching staff. I think he was an assistant coach, or he was a general manager, or something like that. He was involved with the team, and so he was really around that philosophy and that style. And him as a player was also more of a facilitator and shooter as well. So he kind of brought that mold to another level with the Golden State Warriors. And that's kind of where we found ourselves today in this modern league. A lot of effects from both those teams imprinted on this league. And, D'Antoni took all his steps even farther and farther. He's pretty extreme with all of his methods with this Houston Rockets team over the past however long he's been there. I think like 4, 5, 6 years. But yeah, they were really the only team in the West this past half decade that really competed with the Warriors. Really stood up to them and were able to compete in conference finals with them. And he went even so far as to, this season when Clint Capella went down, really just stopped playing centers and started playing like Russell Westbrook or PJ Tucker and Robert Covington eventually when they traded for him as like a pseudo center type of player, and really just went positionless and made it kind of a drive and kick game, mainly prioritized with Westbrook and Harden obviously as those drivers and kickers, and also prioritized corner three, just because that's the most efficient shot in basketball, technically, that and layups, just because it goes by your points per shot attempt, your effective field goal percentage, which I have talked about a lot in a previous episode. I think I don't remember which one it was. One of my within the first 2 or 3 episodes, I had one where I broke down advanced stats like that. So if you want to hear some of that stuff, you should probably go listen to that one. But yeah, so yeah, like I was saying, D'Antoni is just really revolutionary figure as a coach in basketball. And he's, in his I think his lower 70s actually. But yeah, it was weird. I was about to say upper 70s. I think that's not correct. But yeah. The reason I brought him up though was this was his last year on his contract with the Rockets. It was kind of a headline last offseason that Tillman Fertitta, the owner of the Rockets, wasn't giving him an extension just yet. And I feel like a lot of times it was like the media talking about Fertitta and the Rockets not giving D'Antoni an extension. But whenever I had listened to a few interviews with Fertitta talking about it, and he was saying, he's the coach that they want moving forward. They just weren't able to agree upon an extension quite yet. And he kept like echoing that over and over. And, I had definitely doubts that he might just be saying that because he doesn't want the media, the headline, the narrative to be around that and the team as a distraction. But when the news came out that D'Antoni wasn't returning next season, the headline read that D'Antoni informed the Rockets that he was not going to return. So it sounds like it was actually D'Antoni that didn't want to come back. I don't know if Fertitta would have hired him back or not, due to they had a pretty disappointing year this year, relatively, I guess. But yeah, I guess I don't know who's the one that's breaking up with who, but yeah, it's gonna be weird. I think there's not a coach in the league better suited for this team than D'Antoni is, so it's gonna be interesting to see who fills that role now and what the heck they do with this weird roster that like is only like I can only imagine Mike D'Antoni coaching this team without a center, and the way that they are fit together and they work together. But there's talks of Sam Cassell, who is a former Rockets player. He played for those 2 title teams in 94-95 with Hakeem Olajuwon. He played there as a player, but so he has ties with the organization. He's a assistant coach with the Clippers right now. But yeah, there's been rumors of him getting that coaching job, which I think would be interesting. I think it'd be cool for Sam Cassell to get a head coaching position. I don't think he has in the past. I'm pretty sure he hasn't. So I don't know too much about him as like a philosophy or coaching style, but it would be interesting to see somebody else, really anybody else, take that position. And I like Sam Cassell as like a player and personality, so I think it would be kind of fun. And his ties with the Rockets just kind of a perfect story. But yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to say about that. The Rockets, it'll just be interesting to see what happens moving forward. James Harden and Russell Westbrook, whether or not they stay together, like I don't know. Like on paper, they don't really seem like the best fit. Still, we were saying that last season when the trade happened. I think we're saying it a little bit less so now because I think they proved that they can do it at least a little bit better than what I thought. But still, that's not perfect. It's kind of weird just how ball dominant both of them are. But yeah, they share the ball when they're both in there together. They kind of just take turns, and neither of them really play off ball at all, which I think is something that needs to change if they do want to win. They both, like especially Harden, needs to be able to play off. Like he's the better off ball option, just because of his shooting ability and how when he was with OKC, he was a big off ball threat. He moved around off ball, went off screens and pin downs and stuff like that to get open. But he doesn't do that at all anymore. He just stands out at half court, which is part of the offense. I think, like D'Antoni says, that's intentional, which I don't know if it's just Harden wants to do that or if it's mutual. Both D'Antoni and Harden want that. I've heard D'Antoni defend it before by saying that like Harden, they don't want him to lose so much energy throughout the game running around off ball, and then when he gets the ball, have to use his energy again to create something. I guess what they decided to do was have him just stand at half court and have the rest of the guys basically play a 4-on-4, and have him out of the play basically. Which I don't know. I feel like it's just weird. It's a weird thing. I think obviously you'd get better sets when you have Harden as an off-ball weapon, and yeah, so it's just a little different than. And I think that's something that should change for whoever is taking this position next. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with all that. And then the other coaching change that I was talking about was Nash getting hired. Steve Nash getting hired with the Brooklyn Nets to coach KD and Kyrie next season. So. He's replacing Kenny Atkinson, who was fired or mutually agreed to split ways with the organization, which a lot of people I hear like they make fun of the mutual agree to part ways, and say it's just another word for fired or whatever. Which I'm not saying that it can't ever be that case, but I don't know. I feel like mutually agreeing to part ways is definitely a realistic possibility. Like that could happen. Like Kenny Atkinson could think like, maybe this isn't the job for me, which he could have very well been thinking that with KD and Kyrie not really wanting to be that coach in that position, and already had the notion that KD and Kyrie didn't want him there, and also that maybe they didn't mesh super well with each other. Kenny Atkinson is a big development, like he's a big developmental coach, develops teams, but or progressive, that type of thing, progresses teams along in development and shaping who they are as a team. That's what he did with Nets to get them out of the ashes of that Celtics trade. But I think KD and Kyrie are looking for a coach, that will kind of do what they want and then also be their coach to win a championship with, which I don't think Kenny Atkinson really fitted that mold for them, mainly because Atkinson was starting Jarrett Allen at center, which is not what KD and Kyrie wanted, I believe, just because, they're the reasons they got DeAndre Jordan that contract last offseason to come play with them, who's DeAndre Jordan, for those of you who don't know, you probably know his name. He was a good defense. He was a good center within 5 years ago, probably. Like when he was on the Clippers, he was a really good center, lob finisher, borderline all-star some years, like that level of player. He was a good center, one of the probably top 10 centers in the league, at least. But he's been, last couple seasons, a shell of his former self. Lost a lot of his athleticism in his early 30s now, and just hasn't been the same player the last couple seasons. And Jared Allen is an up-and-coming, good, really good defensive center that is just better than DeAndre Jordan right now and should be starting over him. But Katie and Kyrie don't want it that way because DeAndre is their buddy. So they got mad, I think, at Kenny Atkinson for making a decision like that, probably on top of some other things, and wanted him out of there. So they split ways with Kenny Atkinson and had Jacques Vaughn coach for the rest of the season, which probably didn't bother Katie and Kyrie very much, just because they weren't playing for the rest of the season. And so I don't know what they think about Jacques Vaughn, but I do think Jacques Vaughn will be coming on as the assistant for Steve Nash's coaching staff as well. So he's going to stick around. But he did a really good job finishing out the season and coaching the bubble as the head coach of the Nets. And then, Katie and Kyrie both have prior relationships with Steve Nash. So it makes sense that this is the coach they wanted. But also the GM of the Nets, Sean Marks, he is former teammates with Steve Nash. They both played on those 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns that I mentioned just earlier. Oh, yeah, and I just noticed now that we're talking about both D'Antoni and Nash as coaching changes, and I just went on, D'Antoni's backstory, and a lot of it is about Nash because that was his superstar, and Nash is the other coach we're talking about. I didn't even really put that together, that those are the two people we're talking about, but so that's kind of funny. But so it makes sense. Katie was with Golden State for 3 seasons, and Steve Nash was a consultant for the organization back then, and they kind of created a relationship then. And Steve Nash and Kyrie apparently have had some mentor / mentee, whatever you want to call it, type relationships in the past, or types of experiences in the past together. So it makes sense. And also, we've seen it before in the NBA when a superstar player or good to really good player wants a head coaching job, they usually get it pretty quickly. Like if Kobe Bryant said, within the last few years, before obviously he died before his tragic death, but if he were to want to coach the Lakers or coach somebody a few seasons ago, somebody would have hired him. Like there's just certain players that would get that. Steve Nash is that caliber of player. But on top of that, if you were to take any players of all time, any superstars, and to just take that after their playing career and throw them into a head coaching job, the number 1 draft pick for that, I would take. I feel like most people would take Steve Nash. Like of all the superstars ever, like other people kind of like, and really from his era also are like Jason Kidd and Chauncey Billups, but Chauncey Billups, I don't know if you would call him complete superstar, but like those levels, those types of players. But I feel like Steve Nash would be the first pick for most people just because of how cerebral he was, his type of leadership. I think Chris Paul is the same type of way. Once Chris Paul retires, if he wants a head coaching job, he's going to get it. Like, just because the combination of skill set as a player and then also his leadership and cerebral mind for the game that he's showcased throughout his career, just kind of makes you think he'd be a good coach. I'm not saying Steve Nash is for sure going to be a great coach, but he has like the signs that you would think what a really good player that could be a really good coach would have. Like that would be your first option for that. And so that's I guess what I would say to those people. There's a lot of people out there that have been upset about Steve Nash getting hired because he skipped the line. I do that in air quotes. Like people say that, he got a head coaching job way too easily with a really good team he didn't deserve because he hasn't done any assistant coaching before and that kind of stuff. But I don't really understand that because like it makes sense when you look at the history of the league, what has been done in the past. Isaiah Thomas, I believe Doc Rivers too. Like those guys, they got coaching jobs right away, head coaching jobs. They're the first go around. Former players, it just happens sometimes. And especially superstar ones, and especially ones that are the kind of player that Steve Nash is. Like it just all makes sense. And the relationships too, the relationships he has with the GM there and the 2 star players. everything lines up and makes sense for him to get the coaching job. So I'm not mad about it at all. And I don't think anybody should be. How can you blame anybody in that situation for picking Steve Nash? He's obviously a very, very qualified candidate in those ways that I just talked about. But yeah, a lot of people have been talking about what the expectations for him are as this new head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. And, a lot of people are saying either finals appearance or bust or championship or bust for this next season. I don't know if I would go that far. I think championship or bust is a really big term that people throw around there all the time. Like, championships are really hard to win. People kind of act like there's always like, they kind of treat multiple teams per year as like, if you don't win a championship this year, you're a disappointment. Where it's like, how can you say that about multiple teams in the same year? Obviously, only one of them isn't going to be a disappointment then. Like, just that type of thing. But like, I do understand like the idea of it though. But yeah, I think that at least within the next 2 years, they've got to be at least in the conference finals, Eastern Conference Finals, or else it's a complete failure for sure. Like, they didn't do it unless, they're getting injured and stuff like that, which very easily could happen with Kyrie. He gets injured all the time. KD's coming off a really bad injury, and we have no idea what kind of player he's going to be, whether he's going to be looking the same at all or not. But so it's kind of hard to give them expectations with both of the players' futures being so cloudy. On top of this being a brand new head coach. So yeah. Also in a conference that's kind of weird. Where it looks like it's wide open for the most part, but there's still the Bucks to deal with, who are only going to get better, I think. Sixers still have talent on the roster and need to figure it out, but they're going to be there. The Heat look like they're going to be pretty good for the next few seasons, at least consistently. And Celtics, I think, are going to only get better as well. And then Raptors, as long as they have Nick Nurse there, they're going to be competing for stuff. So, yeah, but it's winnable for sure. But I don't know. It's going to be weird. There's just a lot of unknowns about it. So, yeah, I think I'll be done with that for now and move into the playoff stuff. This, I feel like, is going to be a really long episode. I apologize for that. But yeah, it's just I have quite a bit to talk about. The first series I want to talk about is obviously the Nuggets Clippers series for obvious reasons. I'm a Nuggets fan. I don't want to say that literally every episode, but I also kind of have to think about people listening to an episode for the first time. But yeah, so the Nuggets, they have forced a Game 7 now. They were down 3-1. Which is a very familiar thing. We were down 3-1 against the Spurs last season. In the first round, we came back, we won. We were down 3-1 against the Jazz this season, last series. We came back and we won. And now we're down. Now we were just down 3-1 against the Clippers in the second round, and now it's 3-3. We're in our fourth straight Game 7, which is actually the first time any team has ever been to 4 straight Game 7s. So that's interesting. And kind of tiresome at this point that every series has to be this close, this much of a nail biter. It kind of seems like the Nuggets, their true selves only come out, like how good, when their backs up against the wall is the only time they are playing to their full ability, which makes sense for teams, but like, I guess what I'm saying is there's so much of a jump between what they play like usually, like lots of games, versus what they will play like with their back up against the wall. It's weird. They have to be playing from a disadvantage, it seems like, to do well. It's kind of been like that throughout the games too. The past 2 games have been comebacks. No, I don't know. It just kind of works out in every single way you think about it. Lots of games when Nuggets are ahead, they lose big leads. Nuggets lose lots of big leads. I don't know if people know that, but it happens a lot. And then also, I'm never too worried when we're behind by a lot because we come back a lot from 15 to 20 point deficits when that's the deficit, and like at the start of the third quarter or whatever, the Nuggets do it. I don't know. When we're down by a lot, when we have nothing to lose really, or we're like, when we're forced to come through or else we are done, that's when we just do well. And I'm kind of tired of it, to be honest. I kind of want a more consistent effort from everybody. But yeah, that might be too much to ask for, I guess. But yeah, I wanted to talk about Michael Porter Jr. a little bit just because of his comments on that other game. After, I think it was game 5. Yeah, game 5 in post-game. He was asked by a reporter how he plans to get involved more in the offense or something like that. And he responded by saying, like, it's up to the coaching staff and up to play calling on who they want to get the ball in whose hands. And then he said, like, we've been going to Jokic and Murray down the stretch a lot, which, and he pointed out, he said, and they're really good players. You can't get mad at that. They're really good options for sure. But his point was, he said, you don't want to be predictable against a team like the Clippers. You want to share the ball more. You want to get more people involved. Like that's what he thinks. That was his personal opinion. To make the offense more unpredictable against a team like the Clippers, not rely so much on just those two players, which is a valid point. Like, I'm not saying he's totally right, but it's a good idea. Like, that might be, that's definitely something to try. I would say that it's worth, like, something that, it could be worth trying. But what I don't understand was how mad everybody got at him. Not everybody, but a lot of people, mainly players. Like, a lot of the responses that I saw online from, like, fans was like, why are people, kind of agreed with me, whereas, like, why people so mad at him? A lot of them were saying he's right, which I don't know if I'm going to go 100% like, yeah, he's speaking facts or something like that, but, like, it sounded good what he said, I thought. I don't understand why it sounded so egregious to some players. Maybe it's just because of how young he is and that he's saying, like, I understand that that's not the place to say it, really, but I also understand from my personal experience with people, he might just be a different kind of guy. Like, he might not be saying that as a dig. A lot of people were, like, especially on the NBA Ringer NBA show, like Vernon and KOC were talking about on that show. Like, they were saying, like, that he was talking about himself, like that he was mad about that he didn't get the ball at the end of the game. Like, he was being selfish about it, which I don't know. I don't know if that's totally the case. That's definitely probably a motivation or part of it, but, like, do you think that if that didn't happen, he wouldn't at least feel somewhat the same way? Like, if he wasn't thinking about himself? Okay, the reason why I'm saying this is because I like Michael Porter Jr. because he has confidence in himself. If he's a guy that has that much confidence in his abilities, which he should have confidence in his abilities, because it brings out those abilities even more, because he has really good abilities. But he's a guy that is eager for the moment. Like, he's like, like I saw in that game in game 5, there was a possession where it was winding down the shot clock and they were like going to take the final shot of the quarter or something like that. And they basically had Jamal Murray kind of get set up in isolation where Porter had a really good opportunity. Like, he was like, you could tell he was really ready for it and wanted the ball. And I don't know. I feel like we should give him more of those opportunities because from the small sample size that we've seen, he makes some pretty ridiculous shots. Obviously, he makes bad plays. He makes bad mistakes sometimes, lots of times, and that's just because he is a very inexperienced rookie, and the learning curve is different for different people. But I don't know. He's got so much talent in there and so much potential in what he could do, and the fact that we're seeing all these growing pains, I feel like they're blamed on him way too much. Like, these types of things that we're seeing, him being lackadaisical on defense, like just not being in the right positions on defense and making bad turnovers and a little bit of poor shot selection at times. Like, those things should be blamed on Mike Malone because he has had the entire NBA season to put Michael Porter Jr. in more situations like this, where he can grow, where he can develop throughout the course of an entire season. And he has not done that. He was so reluctant to even play him at first, even play him at all. And then finally, when he was in there, he was playing garbage time only at the beginning of the season. That was his only minutes, really, where it was garbage time, and he was lighting it up. And so then Michael Malone was like, okay, we'll give you some more minutes. He ended up averaging on the season somewhere like 13, 14 minutes a game. That's it. It might even be lower than that, like 11. It was something like that. I remember looking at it. Somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes per game. Which, and there was lots of games that were DMPs. He didn't even play at all. Like, you could have been playing him 20 plus minutes a game very easily to get him adjusted. Like, you're investing in a player that you need right now. We need Michael Porter Jr. to win in the playoffs. He is the third option offensively. At his best, he might even be better than Murray in this series. The way that they've been guarding Murray so far, they haven't been paying near as much attention to Porter Jr., so he might be a better option like in this Game 7 or whatever. But I just wish that Michael Malone would have given more foresight. And I thought of it the whole season, thinking, come playoff time, if you really invested in Michael Porter Jr. this whole season, give him the minutes that he needs, and give him the guidance that he needs, the real the game experience that he needs, he could turn into a really useful player come playoff time. But since he didn't do that, he was very reluctant to play him at all. Now we find ourselves in the playoffs, having to go through these very painful growing pains of Michael Porter Jr. not being in the right positions on defense and making bad plays on offense sometimes, just losing the ball, making bad passes, those types of things, just looking lost and inexperienced out there on the floor in a freaking playoff series against many people's title favorites. Why? Why are we in this position? I could have told you, however long, a year ago almost now, back in October when we first started the season, when they weren't playing him, this guy's good, and we need to use him, and we to be able, people act like, and Michael Malone kind of acts like, every time we put him in there and he does something stupid or does something wrong, you take him out and see, I can't trust him, or something like that. Maybe he takes a little bit longer than some guys who fit right in like glue, Matisse Thybulle or Terrence Davis. Those are the types of players they are. They're role players. Michael Porter Jr. is a flamethrower, an offensive super weapon, is what his capabilities potentially could be. That's what when he catches the ball, I'm scared for the other team sometimes. When he'll pump fake, start driving the lane, you can see so many options for him offensively, where he can attract. If he's hitting all those shots, he's going to attract defenses, and that's just going to grow his passing game. He's going to get better at finding the open man, all these things that could have been happening through the regular season. He's the best shooter on the Nuggets, and he gets those shots right in people's faces with such a high release at being 6'10". People can't bother a shot. He does it from deep. He takes stupid shots sometimes, but that's just because of how confident he is, and that's what we need. He's an overconfident guy, but he has the skill set to almost match his confidence. He's that good of a player, and we need him to be confident. We need him to be swaggy, to have the eagerness for the moment, and that's what he has. And I feel like he's been getting a lot of backlash for just wanting that. I think it's kind of stupid. I'm not trying to compare him to Kobe in any way, but all these stories that we share about Kobe 20 years later now, over 20 years later, from when he was a rookie, we share these same types of things that we're just talking about with Michael Porter Jr. that everybody's giving him so much crap for that post-game interview. And when I say so much crap, I mean so much crap. John Hollinger, lots of NBA players. John Hollinger is a pretty well-liked analytical basketball mind. He used to work for the Grizzlies. He worked for the Grizzlies during that draft that MPJ was in, and he said something about how he tweeted out the video of that post-game interview and said, medical reasons weren't the only reason that he fell in the draft or something like that. I don't know, just super disrespectful stuff like that. When you're talking about a 20-year-old kid, who I don't I'm not saying there's no way he had selfish intent in his words, his post-game words. But what I also see is somebody that was like eager for the moment, that also is just kind of unapologetic about what he thinks, and that's fine. It's not like did it sound like to other people that he was really disrespecting Michael Malone in any way? Like he didn't say anything egregious. He just said, I think we should get more people involved. That's a fine thing to voice. I think. But like obviously would be better to voice it to the coaching staff in private. Like that'd be the better option. But why is it such a, like, I don't know, it has all this media coverage and looked at as such like a sinful thing that he did. But like what I was saying about Kobe, if this happened, this type of thing happened to Kobe, we share that as like a looking back on it as a really good moment, like a positive moment. Like that's, nobody thinks negatively of it. As a Kobe story, we talk about Kobe, how he talked to his teammates when he was a rookie, like, give me the ball, get out of my way. Those types of things. Or like in the playoffs, in crunch time, in a playoff game, his rookie year or his second year, something like that. I think it was rookie year. Taking 3 threes and in crunch time and airballing all of them and still taking like the last shot in the game, like still having that much confidence. Like at the time, yeah, probably, I mean, he could have got flack from it maybe, but like he most definitely did. But like we look back at those moments as super positive moments for him. Like we revere him for those moments. And I don't know, I just feel like, why does everybody have to give this guy so much crap for this? Like Damian Lillard and Vucevic and John Hollinger and those people. Just really not that bad of a thing, I think. And I think that, when a lot of people came back at him, a lot of other players came back at him saying like, you can't talk like this when you're the guy that they target defensively, or, things like that, which they have been in the playoffs. But, a lot of that is, I think MPJ has defensive potential. I've seen him like in crunch time last game in game 6. Right? Yeah, in game 6. No, in game 5. So in game 4, after game 4 is when he had those comments. I've been saying game 5 this whole time, but it was after they went down 3-1. So it was game 4, is when he had those comments. Game 5 was the next game, and that's the game that I was just about to talk about, where he had that 3, and with a minute left in the game, it was really kind of the dagger for the most part. Really one of the biggest shots down the stretch was his 3-pointer that he just shot right in the face of Paul George or somebody, I don't know. And then made a big block on the defensive end right after that. And then hit some free throws. I think 4. 4 out of 4 after that. So, yeah. His comments might look a little bit less egregious to most people right now after that game in game 5. But as I was saying about his defense, when he's in the right position, he makes some good plays because of his athletic ability, and I think that he has the aggressiveness and effort to be a good defender. The thing is, I don't know how much of a cerebral player he is, which isn't an insult at all. There's plenty of players like that just aren't, they don't think that many steps ahead on the defensive end. They're not. It's because they're not super familiar with playing team defense against NBA teams and having all those kinds of rotations and things that they have to keep track of. It's not natural to him at this point, and it's easy to exploit. And some players have that more than other players when they're starting, and that's fine. All I'm saying is, it's not like he's some defensive bum for the rest of his career. Like he's gonna get better once he knows those spots. And as I'm saying this, I'm also saying, why is he blamed so much for it? Why is Michael Malone not blamed for that? That he's a defensive weak link right now that people are exploiting to the degree that he is. Michael Malone has a huge part to do with that because of not developing him as a player, using in-game experience as really the only way to simulate those kinds of situations that he's found himself in, really effectively at least. And yeah, I think Michael Malone deserves more blame for that than he gets. So just because, yeah, I don't know. It's not all his fault. I don't know why I've turned into the Michael Porter Jr. Defender. I mean, I like him as a player, but like, I don't know. I just don't like it when people say things that I disagree with logically. But yeah. So yeah, don't hate on MPJ that much. He's a good player. He has weaknesses for sure. Obviously, he makes me mad sometimes. Yeah, like the mistakes he makes, because they're growing pains. They're bad things that happen. It kind of annoys me, but at the same time, it probably wouldn't be happening as much if he played more during the season. So there's that to think about too. Yeah, anyways, I'll talk about the rest of the series now. He also had 13 points last game. Yesterday, Game 6, when they forced Game 7. So he's been pretty good since then. He's made some good shots. Been pretty good for them. Like I said, I think he's the best three-point shooter on the team. Not even I know he is the best three-point shooter on the team. And that's something that the Nuggets kind of lack and really want more of is three-point shooting. So it's going to be definitely useful there within the next, hopefully, like half decade to decade type of range where he's with this team, hopefully. But yeah. Jokic had a super good Game 6. I feel like lots of people kind of noticed this and they were like, oh, finally, like Jokic had a really good game, but he's been really, really solid all year long, all playoffs long. Like before this, he averaged like 25 or 26 points a game, like 10 rebounds, 6 assists. So last game yesterday, he had 34, 14, and 7. And, people took more notice of it because he had some really big shots down the stretch. But yeah, I had my friend Anthony try to tell me last series, at some point in the Utah series, he was like, Jamal Murray is the best player on the Nuggets. He said something like that to me. And I was like, okay, easy. Like we're getting caught up in the moment right now. Nikola Jokic, I told him, next series you'll see it. Jokic is the better player. Usually, like Jamal Murray is more of a wild card. Maybe his peaks are better than Jokic's peaks, but Jokic is a consistent provider, for the contributor for this team. Jamal Murray usually isn't. He has his peaks and valleys. I told you guys before, Nuggets have to go 7. If we're in a series, we're gonna have to go 7. That's just the way it is. But yeah, I want the Nuggets to win. I want, like I said before, right before the playoffs started, I want a conference finals appearance, and that would be awesome. Am I scared of the Clippers? Yeah, because they have the talent to be getting this done. Really, I don't want people to blame Kawhi for this at all. He's been super consistent. Last game was probably his worst so far, but he's been really consistent this entire playoffs. He's been doing what he needs to do. It's really the team around him right now that, even though the team around him is more talented than the team he had in Toronto last season, the team in Toronto last season did their jobs. Like, they were consistent. They were showing up, doing what they needed to do. They had a couple spark plugs there with Van Vliet and Danny Green, who were complete crap at some points with not being able to make a shot, but then showed up really big in the finals and stuff, and they were making shots finally. But with this Clippers team, they fade in and out of like superstardom and mediocrity so often. Like, it's like they have it together one minute and they're going on runs, and then the next minute they don't know what they're doing out there. They just don't have cohesiveness. I had my father-in-law actually ask me. He was like, "So you think the Nuggets are the better team then?" After we forced Game 7 yesterday, and I was like, "No, I mean, like, the Clippers, they are the more talented team for sure, without a doubt. But I think what you might be saying is the Nuggets are way more cohesive because we've been running it back for so long. MPJ is really, I guess MPJ and Jeremy Grant are really the two guys we kind of added to the mix of this season, but they played all season together, MPJ is probably, the most foreign entity in this rotation, in these rotations, just because he didn't play a ton of minutes throughout the season, and this is his first year. But with the Clippers, their two best players, Kawhi and Paul George, this is their first season together, and they've never, it's the first season with the team and their first season together. They've never played as teammates before, and a lot of the season they were not playing together. Kawhi sat out back-to-backs, and had stretches where he I don't think he was playing even beyond that. And then Paul George missed a lot of the big portion of the beginning of the season, and also kind of load managed throughout the rest of the season also, and just kind of coasted while he was in there for the most part. Didn't really have super aggressive season in terms of him trying to, get numbers or score or win or even, But so they didn't have a lot of experience together yet as a team with their two best players. So I think what you're seeing is some of those growing pains of not using the season to build cohesion and chemistry a little bit. With the Raptors before, Kawhi was the only new piece, and Kawhi's pretty much plug and play. And those guys around him they just lost a star. So it's like they lost a star and they got a star, and they knew what they needed to do around their star, who had a very similar play style offensively to DeMar. Their former star DeMar DeRozan was a guy that gets you buckets in the mid range. Down the stretch, that's exactly Kawhi. That's exactly what Kawhi was doing for him. Very similar play style offensively. And then, so they fit in better together. I think that's why you're not seeing the Clippers do as well as the Raptors did last season. Even though at this point, I think the Clippers have only lost one more game than the Raptors did at this point, because the Raptors went to Game 7 in round 2 last year against the Sixers. That was the hardest series they had to deal with, was that Sixers series, which just on paper, when you're looking at it, the Clippers probably have much harder series after this in the Lakers versus this series against the Nuggets. So it's not exactly the same. But last season Raptors did go Game 7 against the Sixers, and that's where Kawhi hit that shot that rimmed around like for 4 seconds before it went in. But yeah. I think what you're seeing with these Clippers, just lack of chemistry. Marcus Morris is a new addition that they just got at the trade deadline, I think. Yeah, who's been playing a lot of minutes for them. He's brand new. They lost Gallinari and Tobias Harris from last season. Even though they lost him midseason, which Gallinari was one of their main options offensively last year, and also not really the same as Paul George and Kawhi. Offensively, for the most part, they handle the ball a lot more. So it's just a lot of differences, a lot of different stuff, kind of going in and around. JaMychal Green is new also this season. Yeah, and Nuggets have just been running it back for most of the years. Like I said, MPJ is really the only really new one. Granted, this is his first full year, but stylistically fits really well along these guys. And then Jokic and Murray have been together all of Murray's career, which has been like 4 or 5 years now. Gary Harris has been around since he got drafted 7 years ago, I think. So yeah, they've been through it. Craig, this is his 3rd season, I think, or 4th even. Monte Morris has been here his whole career. Paul Millsap has been here for 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. Mason Plumlee has been here for about the same amount of time. Will Barton also. I think they both came over at the same time with the Nurkic trade when Denver traded Nurkic to Portland for, I think, Plumlee and Barton were the two main guys that we got back in that. But Barton, has obviously been out in the playoffs this year, but Plumlee's still there, providing really good minutes off the bench at center. So, but yeah, I think that's really what you're seeing. What it really comes down to is Nuggets are playing better as a team the past few games, just because Clippers don't have that cohesion as much, and have kind of have gotten used to coasting through the regular season to try to turn it on in the playoffs. I think you're kind of seeing it sputter a little bit. Like, you can't just expect the whole team to just flip the on switch all at the same time, and being able to really have complete control over that. So yeah, I'd be scared if I was a Clippers fan. Just to be honest, I would. But I'd also be scared if I was a Nuggets fan, which I am. So, because we don't know. It's Game 7. Anything could happen. And usually if I'm going into a Game 7, from what we've known from the last year or two, Kawhi would probably be the guy you want to choose in most scenarios to have on your team. So, yeah, I'm for sure scared. But, Nuggets don't have anything really to lose. We weren't supposed to win this series. We weren't supposed to make it to a Game 7 in this series. So, yeah. But it'll be awesome if we do get it. And, hopefully Nuggets can still play like last few games, like their backs up against the wall, and really play as a unit. So we'll see. Then there's Raptors Celtics, which I haven't talked about near enough about. So, that Raptors Celtics series, it went down to Game 7, which I think we may have touched on a little bit in the last episode that I did with Jacob. But yeah, it was pretty much what I expected. I did pick the Celtics to win that series, so I'm still 100% so far in who I've picked to win series. So that's cool. But and both of those were upsets in the East, the Heat and the Celtics. So yeah. And also, this is the first series ever that the away team has won every single game, which just kind of shows you that home and away doesn't mean anything in the bubble, just because it's only crowd noise that really changes. But yeah, so that was weird. But like I said, Celtics they just have the better ISO scores. They have the better playoff guys in Kemba and Tatum, which they completely shut down Kemba the last 2 games of the series with doing that box and one, which he wasn't hurting them a ton throughout the series. So it was kind of confusing that they do that Nick Nurse was playing box and one on him, but I guess he was just doing it, just to cut it off, like not even have him as an option, which they were doing really well, really cutting him off. They switched to a box and one just about every time he came in the game, and so Brad Stevens, I think, really played him fewer minutes than usual. So I think Nick Nurse got what he wanted there, but couldn't end up with the victory in the end. Ended up pretty close. I think, but really in the end, it kind of was clear who was going to win, I think. Yeah. Siakam, he had maybe a little bit of a better game this game than he had previously, but yeah, he's just not the same player I think that we thought he was going to be going into this postseason. I talked about a bit that he's really good in the open floor and that those opportunities aren't going to be here as much, but I wasn't really expecting this. Maybe he's just kind of cold and that's feeding into it also, but it seems like in the half court, he really goes for the same moves every time in isolation, which is, he catches the ball in a post up and kind of spins over his right shoulder. I guess either shoulder usually, but he does a lot of spin moves. And the Celtics have really keyed in on it, and they are not scared. Like they knew what he was doing basically every time. He was just very predictable to them, and Nick Nurse was really trying to keep going to Siakam to get him going, and it just wasn't working. So that really killed, I think, the series for them. If Siakam could have performed better, they probably could have won. But yeah, it just kind of breaks that way sometimes. But I think Siakam will improve. We thought, he's a really good player in transition, kind of like the Ben Simmons and Giannis thing. Like he in the open floor, getting downhill, he's really long and athletic, so he can finish at the rim when he gets that big runway going for him. And then last season, he was good. He was really good on that Raptors team with Kawhi as the primary scorer and him playing more off ball. I think Siakam is really good at that. A really good option for that. Being a guy who spots up in the corner, or they can be the secondary option, who you can have less focus on him, and when Kawhi is not working for the number one option, swings it over to him, and he takes it off the dribble and drives against a closeout, or things like that. I think that's where we have seen Siakam be the best so far, and this season he just didn't have opportunities like that because he was like the main guy offensively that they had to focus on, and he hasn't developed into that yet. So just from what we've seen. But yeah, and then Heat Bucks. So that happened a while ago. I don't think I've talked about. I might have talked about how they closed him out. I can't remember if I've talked about the series since it got over. But I know I did say that it was going to go 5. Well, by the time it was like 3-0, I said that I knew that the Bucks weren't going to lose or weren't going to lose in 4. I knew that they were going to take at least 1. Didn't happen the way that I thought it would because Giannis went down, and then Chris Middleton turned into Michael Jordan. So I don't know why Chris Middleton waited until Giannis was. It's kind of the opposite of the Siakam and Kawhi thing. Like Siakam's better with a Kawhi. Chris Middleton seems to be better when he doesn't have a better guy there. I don't know. It's not like he got opportunities that he didn't get while Giannis was in there. I don't understand it. He should have better options when Giannis is in there, or better looks because he's keyed in on much less. But a lot of times in crunch time when Giannis is in there, they kind of switch off between them. They run plays for Chris, they run plays for Giannis, but he just not looked like that. Like the way he looked in game 5 game 4. Game 5 he looked good too, but not near as good as game 4. That's for sure, especially down in crunch time. But game 5 he played well too, which he didn't have a lot of games where he played well this postseason. He had a few in this Heat series, but really none in that Orlando series for the most part. Maybe one or two, but yeah. It was a disappointing year for the Bucks, but I did pick the Heat to win before the series started, and so I was glad to see that happen. And yeah, I think I'm gonna pick the Heat going into the Celtics series as well, just because the Heat have a lot of guys to guard the threats on the Celtics side of things, which are the Tatum and Brown tandem, and also Kemba. Like Jimmy Butler has shown in the past to be a really good defender on Kemba. For the most part, like do a pretty good job. And without Jimmy Butler on him, there's also Goran Dragic, who's a good one-on-one defender. Really, I think Kemba's going to have a better series this series than he did against the Raptors last series. But Tatum and Brown, if they want to stop them, they can. For the most, like Tatum's going to get his points for sure, but like because that's how good of a player he is. But they're going to make life hard on those guys for sure. They have endless wing defenders to throw at them. You could even switch Bam onto them. But yeah, they just have guys to throw on them, like Crowder, like Iguodala, and like obviously Jimmy Butler. And they're going to do their job on them. And so, yeah, it's going to be hard because, like, I don't know. Like, Celtics are really good. They both have really good coaches. Celtics have just as much talent, I think. And especially with Gordon Hayward back, they have just as much talent. But the Heat have looked really cohesive, really nice, with a higher effort on their side. And I think my heart is just telling me Heat. And so I'm going to go with the Heat. But it's going to be a tough series. I think it's going to be like 6 or 7, which I've said about most of the series we've got into now, because I think there's a lot of parity in this league where a lot of teams are very well matched, evenly matched, which I love. I think this postseason is awesome in terms of that. Not awesome in terms of how we got here and how all this stuff changed and happened. But yeah, I'm really glad with where the league is at right now in terms of parity, in terms of like distribution of players and talent across teams and coaches and everything like that. So it makes for a very entertaining scenario. I like it when there's no like clear title favorite, which at this point is probably the Lakers. But like if you had to put somebody in that category, but still there's plenty of doubts that you can have with the Lakers. That stuff just didn't exist with the Warriors. You were praying, you were like holding on to a prayer that something bad happened to the Warriors or like something really good happened for another team. With this, it's like Lakers could very easily be upset by somebody, by one of these teams, by the Clippers, which that wouldn't really technically be that much of an upset, but it would still be somewhat of an upset. And then like Heat or Celtics, like that could happen. It's not inconceivable for sure. So yeah, but Lakers are still my pick for the finals to win it all. They have been this for a long time, ever since Kobe died, really. So yeah, I'm sticking with them over either Clippers or Nuggets. I think Clippers obviously have a better chance of beating them than Nuggets do. But if the Nuggets win this series, win Game 7 tomorrow, obviously I'm going to be cheering for the Nuggets to beat the Lakers. That's going to be awesome. If the Nuggets make it to the finals, I'd probably cry. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. But obviously for predictions and to remain intellectually consistent, I couldn't take myself seriously if I actually did pick the Nuggets to actually like literally be the winner of the Lakers. Like that'd be really, really risky of me. Do I think it could happen? Technically, yeah, possibility, but probably not. It's probably not going to happen. And Lakers are, I think, definitely the better pick. I think over every team now. Yeah. I don't think there's much I want to go into other than that. I did have a rant last episode with Jacob, I think. At least it was the side that went up on his podcast, which I don't know if it's even gone up yet. I haven't seen it. I don't know if he's uploaded it yet. He kind of takes a while sometimes to upload stuff, and that's just because he's busy. But, yeah. So, but on that one, I did have a rant about LeBron and AD pick and roll, not using it. Like, do they think that they're saving it and that people aren't expecting it or something, or something like that? Like, they need to use it more in the crunch time moments that they've had. It's just kind of an unstoppable play to use, like this card that you can pull out and trump a lot of things with it. They haven't really gone to it all. I think they probably should, but yeah. I think that'll be it for this episode. I did talk a lot. I had a lot to talk about, and I was talking to myself again. I think it gets better, like what I did last episode where I talk with another person, but it's easier to get all my things out, all the things I want to talk about when I'm with myself, and really focus on, the things I'm talking about, and also scheduling wise when I want to talk about them. Obviously it's easier by myself, but I think the product is it's better from what I've seen so far. With doing it with Jacob, I thought it just turned out better. Like, it sounds better listening to it, that there's another voice. I'm speaking much more conversationally. I think I was pretty passionate and upbeat this whole episode, hopefully. So hopefully that was better than some of the other episodes where I've sounded really sad and like just, I don't know, really tired and not giving much effort into being, I guess, more entertaining as a podcast host. Mainly because, other episodes I was prioritizing with the information, the content, which I do still prioritize, but you need to deliver it in a way that get people hooked and interested, and I think that's really important. So that's something that I need to work on. And I think doing it conversationally with another person helps that really well automatically. But, there's people like Bill Simmons and like Zach Lowe and other guys that do this for a living that are really good, that I look up to, that make these kinds of podcasts that can carry an episode by themselves for the most part, even though they don't usually, because obviously it's always better to have another guy there, another voice to bounce things off of, but they can carry an episode pretty well on their own, and make it interesting still. And yeah, that's something that I'd like to work on and get better at, obviously because I do it a lot, because I don't have as many options to have people on to talk about this stuff with. So yeah, but yeah, thanks for listening to this episode. If you're listening on YouTube, I'm going to go through the whole spiel again, even though I do it every episode. If you're listening on YouTube and you like the video or like the podcast, please press like. And if you like to also consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're listening on Spotify, please consider following the Spotify feed to listen to new episodes when they come out. But yeah. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next time.